All right, so hey, people of God, this is Rashana B back with On My Way Up movement, and I'm back with an encouraging word. So I wanted to talk to you who are now in a good place, okay? You've made it to your promised land, you've made it to your breakthrough, you're in the land of plenty, or at least just in a place of relief, okay? A sense of relief and release, okay? You've been for a while going through the waters of affliction and the fiery trials. You've been taking a lot of hits, a lot of ills, a lot of losses. There's been a lot of pain. There's been a lot of suffering. Maybe you've been going through your testing, as a believer, your growth, your due process to greatness or, blessing. And now you're there and you're struggling with enjoying it because you're in a state of fear, anxiety, wondering, is this going to last? You're waiting for that moment for everything to collapse because you've been in a place of darkness or just a place of struggle and pain for so long. And it's not that you don't have the faith. You know who God is. You know what God has brought you through. You know what He's brought you to. But you're struggling with, enjoying it and just resting in your blessings, in your promised land. And this has more to do with a need of healing, a need for healing, not necessarily a lack of faith. Okay, maybe you've been walking under a curse for a while. You've been in a state of reproach, basically, and reproach means disappointment, shame, disgrace. What I talked about, what you've probably been going through for a while. And it's like everything just feels too good to be true. The Israelites, the Bible tells us in the book of Zechariah that when they made it back to Israel, they were on the mountaintop and they were looking out at the land, and they said that it was as though it was a dream. It felt like it was too good to be true, And so you just need to be honest with God and let Him know what you're feeling. God already knows. So many of us feel like we're keeping a secret from God. God knows. He just wants you to be upfront and be 100, be genuine, be authentic, and just tell Him, because He wants that sort of rapport, that sort of communication, with you. He wants that sort of friendship with you. Go back and look at how candid Moses spoke with God in the book of Numbers, chapter 11, when he's, frustrated with the people. They're complaining for meat, and the conversation that he has with God is refreshing to me. The conversations that David had with God, the conversation that Gideon has with the angel about his position in life. He was very open, very candid. All his frustration, all his pain, it was just the rawness of it, that really, 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 I find refreshing for me, and it's one of the things that I find most comforting about being in a relationship with God. There's certain things that I won't talk about with humankind, with man, with woman. There's certain vulnerabilities that, I won't expose the way that I will expose to God. This is why I like being in the presence of God. This is why I like prayer. This is why I like solitude. And I like being able to just get lost in conversation with God, or just hearing from God, or just pouring out to God, because it's a safe place. It's a safe place where I can get naked with God, figuratively, emotionally, psychologically. And I can tell Him, God, things have been so hard. Things have been so painful for me, God, that right now in this state of blessing and relief and just goodness, God, that I find myself clinging to it with a fear, with an apprehension that it's just going to slip through my fingers, and that I'm going to go back into the dark place that I've been, and that's when God told me. He said, it's not that you lack the faith. You know who I am. It's trauma. You need healing. Take it one day at a time. God knows your heart. He knows how you feel about Him. He knows that you believe in Him. He knows that you know who He is. Who knows Him better than a person who's been in the trenches and have been brought out to the light? Who knows God better than that? Who understands the power and the grace of God than a person who's been brought up out of the miry pit by the hand of God? It's not that you're lacking faith. And so you keep saying, God, help me with my faith. Help me with my unbelief. And those are awesome prayers and continue to pray that, because your trauma is manifesting in a way of doubt and confusion, okay, in a way of unbelief, perhaps. That's how Satan is coming. He's using that trauma. I've talked about how trauma is like a bloody wound, okay, and that you have certain toxic people, you have narcissistic people who smell that blood and they're drawn in as though a shark to blood, okay. And so they're drawn to it. They're drawn to your unhealed places, your undelivered places. This is the same with Satan and his minions, okay? He knows that you've gone through things. He knows. He's seeing you. He's watching you cling to your blessings. He's watching you, struggling with enjoying them, and he's loving it. He's eating it up. And so he's completely beating you over the head with all kind of thoughts of doubt and fear and, being miserly with the prosperity that God has blessed you. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying squander, your inheritance or squander your blessings from God, your prosperity, your financial breakthrough. I'm not saying that at all. But what I do know is that God doesn't want you to be miserly about it, holding on to it with dear life. And, the man with the one talent, he was miserly with God, with what God gave him. And when God came back and, asked him about what had he done with his one talent, and he said, I kept it to myself, I buried it. He was so afraid of losing it. And God cursed him. Took the one thing that he had and gave it to the one that had 10, the one that was, wise, not squanderous, but wise. And he was, he enjoyed his talents. He enjoyed, his fruitfulness, the fruit of his labor, the fruit of his talents, And so that happens to us. That have been through so much. It's almost like a woman who have been in a very, very abusive relationship for a long time, and she finally meets a good guy and she's unable to receive that blessing. It's not that she's incapable of love, but it's the trauma, okay, that stops her from moving forward and enjoying it, okay? Either that or she's very, very insecure and clingy to the guy because she doesn't want to lose him. And this has to do with just fear of it being, of it slipping through her fingers, okay? Either she's not going to accept it and just be emotionally distant and not allow him in, or either she's going to cling too tightly. But there's that happy medium that I'm talking about, of enjoying your blessings and yet still being wise, But pray about being healed in those places. Talk to God about it. Let him know, God, I know who you are. I know how powerful you are. I know what you can do, God. But things have been so dark for me for so long that I find myself, just thinking that what if I wake up tomorrow and I find myself back in that state of reproach, find myself back in that place of, walking under a curse, or the way that it felt. There's things in our life, there's dark periods in our life that when we think about them, we literally cringe. I know for me, like I can think about some of the darkest moments in my life, and literally right now I can think about it and will have to, I feel the need to cringe. Those are those places where you need healing. That's trauma. Not necessarily a lack of faith. It's just manifesting in that way. And so that was the beautiful conversation that I had with God this morning. And I wanted to share with you all, the key, and the key to it all is just being really, really open with God. If you're not going to be authentic and 100 with nobody else, do it with God. He will never expose you. He will never betray you. He will never go back and share what you tell him in confidence. It's not like that. He will never judge you. God welcomes a person who is extremely candid with him. There are several accounts in the Bible where, prophets and disciples were extremely open and honest with him, to the point where you're almost feeling like, wow, he was just a little too raw. Maybe that came off a little disrespectful, especially, the conversation with Moses in the book of Numbers chapter 11. But, had it been disrespectful, we know that God probably would have struck him, or checked him like he did Job. When Job was disrespectful towards God, he questioned God in the book of Job, and Job was asking God, well, questioning God, and and what was going on in his life, and God comes back. I think in Job 38, and starts the conversation off by basically saying, "Were you the one that created Leviathan? Were you the one that created this and that?" And God just started going off. And then the next chapter, the first verse, Job comes back and says, basically, maybe I just spoke a little fast. Maybe I overtalked myself. Okay, so it's interesting conversations like that I've learned. That's been the blueprint for me with God. Just pouring out my heart and sharing with Him. The contents of my heart. This is why David tells God, examine me. Examine me. Look at me. Look in me, God. What do you see? Tell me what you see, God. Just see me, into me. See into me. Intimacy. That's the key with God. And so, it's okay if what you went through have left, some residue on you. But God is a God who delivers. He cleans up. He restores. He replenishes. He takes filthy garments and gives you garments that are as white as snow. You know. So, God understands that, there are parts of you that are suffering from trauma, from being under a curse, or just going through, your period of affliction, a calamity, or just even your due process into greatness, which is very painful, And so I hope that this blesses you all, because it really, really blessed me. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, tell me what you all think about my content, and I'll be back with another word.